Welcome, everyone. Welcome back to another live stream. It is your host, Danny Dhaiphong, and I have a very special panel for you today, a very special show for you today. As you come on to the stream, make sure you hit the live button, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and make sure you go to the video description to find all the places where you can support this show from Patreon, Substack, and so much more. Without further ado, today we are going to do a really deep dive into West Asia, what's happening there, especially with regard to the resistance from Gaza to Lebanon. And of course, there is the impending Iran attack. Of course, the election in the United States just happened. So we will be factoring that into the equation as well. But without further ado, let me introduce my guests. My first guest, they will be together, of course, but the first guest I will introduce is Ghadi Francis. She is a Lebanese journalist. You can find her at the West Asia Post, as well as so many other places as she discusses her perspective from Lebanon and the resistance. Ghadi, thanks so much for joining me again today. It's really good to see you again.
It's good to converse with you always, Danny. Thanks for having me.
Of course, of course. And then first-time guest, the prolific war correspondent and journalist on all things West Asia and the resistance. We are introducing Elijah Magnier. Thanks so much, Elijah, for joining. We are introducing
Thank you for having me.
Magnier. Thanks so much, Elijah, for joining. I think there might be an echo on your side, Elijah. Do you have headphones by any chance? I think there might be an echo on your side, Elijah.
I hear you double, so I hear myself and I hear you twice.
He maybe have the YouTube on some other computer.
Yes. Hold on one second.
Some other computer.
Yes. Okay. Yeah, it's definitely coming from Elijah's side. So let me see if I can. I can't edit his mic. Elijah, are you able to find? Do you have no headphones or? Oh, Elijah has left the building. Well, we can get started as we wait for Elijah to return. Ghadi, I wanted to ask you, let's begin with first what Sheikh Naim Qassam, the new Secretary General of Hezbollah, has declared Operation People of Might. There have been record numbers of attacks that Hezbollah has been conducting operations. And I wanted to ask you what the state of the resistance is right now in Lebanon, given the fact that the devastation continues. It's not as much in the news. We have a lot about Donald Trump and the U.S. election, but I wanted to ask you your thoughts on what's happening with the resistance at this moment as we wait for Elijah to come back here.
Well, the resistance is resisting. It's always what we expect from the resistance is very different from what we expect from an army. An organized army. The resistance is just preserving itself, its stamina, ascending order of operations, of distances, and of kinds of missiles. I think we can break down the details of how the growth and how the momentum has been growing in the past few weeks and in the past year in general while discussing the resistance. Now, speaking about Sheikh Naim Qassam, or the new emerging image of Hezbollah post Nasrallah, this is just, we are getting used to the organization rather than the icon. The organization has been here for decades. Lebanese people know it very well. They have practiced and experienced the resistance in different shapes and forms since the first time the Israelis actually invaded our country. So, for the first time in the history of this people, we have a resistance that could actually make drones, use these drones, target very important areas. And today, I think there was a maritime base. They have been targeting, they have already targeted the prime minister, the Israeli prime minister. This is a precedent. There's no precedent. This is a first time thing. And also the rockets, the amount, the intensity, all of this, it is unprecedented in the history of the resistances. So Hezbollah is now emerging as an organization that not only could preserve itself in such a brutal war and continuous attacks. I think today I read some statistics that the amount of bombings and the intensity and the frequency that has been used in the past month in Beirut hasn't been precedented, not even in Gaza during this war. So in front of all this kind of attack, you have a Hezbollah that is not only healthy, it is actually thriving and ascending order kind of manner in all its operations. I think we have Elijah with us, and he's usually my source for these kinds of insights. So having him, I feel kind of embarrassed to speak now.
Elijah, well, Radi, I think that was an incredible summary of what's happening. And Elijah, perhaps you can get into some of the details because as Donald Trump was being elected in the United States, Hezbollah was conducting what many have called a record-breaking amount of strikes into Israel using a new ballistic missile, larger and more powerful than before. And I'm curious if you could give the audience an understanding of what Hezbollah has been doing, how it's been able to conduct this kind of onslaught amid what Radi was referencing, this massive just devastation Israel is trying to impose on the people of Lebanon. And yet Hezbollah persists. You have said that Hezbollah has actually defeated Israel militarily. Help the audience understand how.
I'm going to start with the end. So why Hezbollah has defeated Israel militarily is because there are 5 divisions along the Lebanese borders that is between 70 to 80,000 men. And after more than 5 weeks, they are unable to remain in any position in the south of Lebanon. Therefore, they did not take any static position or high ground on any hill, but they have managed to destroy many villages. That is not a military victory. But the mere fact that they are incapable of remaining on the ground, they've lost the war. And they will continue destroying, but they can win the war if they can achieve their objectives. So far, we have seen the Israelis attempting to move not only the paratroopers and the commanders' forces, but they try to push the armored divisions, and they have 2 armored divisions along the borders. And every time they try to break into the borders, they move just a few hundred meters and they have their tanks destroyed. This is the battle between laser-guided missiles, anti-tank missiles that can be fired from 8 kilometers, and the incapability of the Israeli to neutralize these missiles and those who are carrying these missiles. Therefore, this is the dilemma of the Israeli to try and occupy 500 square kilometers that Israel said it would at the beginning of the war, thinking that Hezbollah has not been defeated. But then, if we want to move to something else, I don't want to occupy a lot of time. What you mentioned about the precision missile is really a game changer, and that needs a conversation per se.
Mm. Well, Radi, I know that you've been traveling a lot throughout Lebanon, doing a lot of journalism on the ground. Given what Elijah said about the military situation, what is the mood and how are people perceiving the state of not just the resistance, but also the overall situation that both Lebanon and the region finds itself in?
I have said this before, but I can't say it enough. I'm so proud to be Lebanese in this moment of history. I mean, tell me about the people. Tell me about any nation that has witnessed 1 million displaced in one day and could actually govern and manage the situation. I'm so proud of the society, of the community in Lebanon. The way that the impact has been absorbed and the way the community is really reaching out to each other and accepting and actually supporting and maintaining kind of relief with very minimal and scarce conditions, given that Lebanon is under siege. It's under an economic siege from the United States of America, and actually the Israelis and the Americans prohibited the Iraqi planes and other planes to come holding relief, medical relief, and other kinds of relief. So Lebanon is a country in siege, but in that war and in such a displacement, a very numerous displacement, you could see that the Lebanese society reached out to each other. And we're not in our best times. Obviously, we are witnessing a destructive war, but the society is holding on. You see, this resistant society, the Lebanese people, have witnessed these kinds of wars time and again. The Israelis have been aggressive with us for decades. So although this destruction is unfathomable, but you could see that people have witnessed this destroyed houses before, and then they have rebuilt it. So this gives them a sense of resilience, hope, and in a way, trust and confidence of the actual ground operations and the ground deterrence that is actually happening meanwhile in the southern Lebanon and in other areas of Lebanon.
Yeah, and Elijah, Ghadi just mentioned the ground operation. I know that you mentioned the game-changing missile that Hezbollah is using. Could you also talk about, if you wanted to discuss this, but also the situation in this ground operation? I know Israel has thrown tens of thousands, upwards of 50,000 troops to try to invade southern Lebanon, and the reports are very grim. Even today, I believe you had reported, Elijah, that the IDF has just, been handed heavy casualties. Could you describe the situation there? Where is it at, and how has it been going?
What the media is not reporting is what the Israelis are faced with in the south of Lebanon. Because as they try to advance, Hezbollah uh, infantry, plus supported by the special forces, they are using rockets and they are engaging from close vicinity against the Israelis. And this is why there are heavy casualties among the Israeli occupation forces. Now, we have seen yesterday the use of one of the most advanced, well, not the most advanced, but one of the most advanced missile, that the Fateh 110. Hezbollah has the most modern version, and it has also the Imad 1 and 2, it has Zulfikar, but the decision to start with almost 9-meter missile and to show how this missile is brought from under the ground to the surface in an area that's wide enough to accommodate many other missiles, and to launch it by flooding the Israeli interception system simultaneously, it shows that there is a new decision to increase the attack. Now, throughout the decades, we've seen Hezbollah, the way they conduct the war, they don't go really showing every single capability they have. And by limiting themselves into drones and rockets and medium range missile in the last 12 and a half months, and now starting with a more precision missile like the Fateh 110, it showed they have started a new decision, which is to decide and inflict more pain on the Israeli, but again, very measured, because it is, according to my experience, watching Hezbollah would not use a large quantity and number of missiles of the same kind to avoid driving the Israeli crazy and then start bombing everywhere in Lebanon. But they are injecting slowly but surely a new type of missile for the Israeli to get used to it, and then the number of these missiles will be increased. But also, we've seen in the underground where Hezbollah showed us the Fateh 110, two pictures, the one of Sayyid Nasrallah and the one of Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Because the Fateh 110 is a game changer that cannot be used by Hezbollah without the approval of the supplier, in this case, Iran. And here we understand that Iran really wants to make sure that the Israeli and the Americans will understand that it is not going to give up on Hezbollah, regardless the cost of this war, exactly like Hezbollah and Iran did in Syria. So that is a strong message that came yesterday, indicating that the war that we're going to face, at least in the next 2 months, when Donald Trump is going to take office on the 20th of January. So we're going to see a different level of intensified battle in the south of Lebanon.
Yes, and Radi, there's been talks of diplomacy there, or an emphasis on talks, because when it comes to this conversation that's arisen about a potential ceasefire, how do you see this? Because it seems to me, of course, Israel has already rejected even just the notion and conversation of one happening. But what does it say that now we are hearing in the Western media talks of a potential ceasefire here? Of course, Israel has said in recent months, especially over the last month, that if its ground operation is going to wind down, it's because it's already done what it wanted to achieve. What do you say, though, about this ceasefire talk that's been going on in the Western media?
First of all, there's zero credibility for all that Western media and for that diplomacy. I think more than 1 year into the ongoing genocide in Gaza, we have had enough proof of what these ceasefire talks actually breed and how effective they are. What diplomacy are we speaking about? We have the Israelis actually today closing the only United Nations relief organization that is there for the millions of Palestinian refugees. I'm speaking about UNRWA. And they actually, in their Knesset, called it a terrorist organization. What diplomacy? There has been a continuous impunity given by the West, and the Western media is complicit to the Israelis to carry on all kinds of war crimes, all kinds of crimes against humanity. And they actually took the footage, they televised it. We had the ICC probing into that. We had the ICJ ruling about that. And what happened? So do you really come and speak to people while they are being slaughtered about ceasefire talks and diplomacy, and led by whom? By the actual West that funds and fuels and actually arms and weaponizes this colony in the area. We do not really acknowledge any ceasefire talks, Danny. I don't really give them any attention at that point. We do look at them when the ceasefire talks are coming under the fire. So whatever talks would happen, they would come after the actual deterrence is proven on the ground. There is no diplomacy that cares about us. I think the world has already proven to the Palestinians, to the Lebanese, to the Syrians, and beforehand to the Iraqis that our lives don't matter. They have all kinds of proof of all kinds of war crimes against our children and our women and our prisoners of war. And what did they do about it? Did they care? So we have lost all kind of faith in law or humanity or diplomacy. What we really wait for is the actual ground deterrence that makes and places the actual realities. And because of Fatah and its likes, because of the drones and the deterrence, because of the ground heroes that are actually on the soil of Lebanon, pushing back the Israelis daily in every village in the southernmost areas of Lebanon, because of that, and only because of that, that the war would stop. This is how I see it.
Yes, and I'm glad you said this, Radi, because I wanted to then kick it back to you, Elijah, on this connection between the absolute brutality as well as the effectiveness of Israel and then the effectiveness of the resistance. Why would then the resistance even think about any kind of ceasefire when it comes to what's happening in Lebanon alone, because we have this entire picture regionally that maybe you could speak to, which says not only could you never trust a ceasefire, but also the resistance has gotten stronger, and it's Israel that has been looking worse and worse on the military front. What do you say about that, Elijah?
Since 2006, there was no ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. There was a cessation of hostility. That was the deal to stop the war, which means that the war can restart anytime one of the two sides decides to start it. Now, why the resistance would want to ceasefire is because of the civilians. Israel has the air dominance, and it has all the supply in the world that it can receive from the Americans and the Germans. The strategic warehouses that belong to the United States in the Negev are at the disposal of Israel. The Americans supply the Israelis with more than 50,000 tons of explosives. No country in the world can go to war without counting the ammunition it has, at the exception of Israel, because it has an unlimited supply. And this is why we've seen the Israelis, when they want to send a message, they destroy 4, 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 buildings, because they don't care. They have so many bombs that they use it. So this is why the resistance is concerned about the reconstruction and is concerned about its own people. And the Israelis showed at the beginning of the war in Gaza that they really don't care about the civilians, committing war crimes, crimes against humanity, and now the Israel is accused of intent of genocide, is under trial. It's because the Israelis are unaccountable. But on the other hand, the resistance care about the civilians. And this is why we have seen, for example, Hezbollah, because it has a precision missiles and drone, is not firing against the civilians. And those who have been killed are a limited number that can be classified as collateral damage. On the contrary, on the Israeli side, they bomb indiscriminately any target they think of, or they want to inflict pain on the resistance. The first day Israel started the war against Lebanon, they bombed every single house they know about of a Hezbollah operative in his home with his family, killing him and the entire family, because the resistance is fighting the most immoral and unethical army in the world. But the resistance cares and understands the winter is coming and people need to seek refuge. As Ghadi said, there are more than 1,200,000 internally displaced people. They need a shelter, they need a place to live, and the reconstruction is going to take a few years. Therefore, the resistance is holding the gun in one hand and a deal in the other, to say to Israel, we accept the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1701 and nothing more, or we continue fighting, because civilians matter.
Yes, indeed. Well, I wanted to ask both of you, and perhaps Rada, you could start. In the United States, we just had Donald Trump elected as the president of the United States, and that will transpire in 2025 in January. And I wanted to ask you, Radi, there's been a lot of talk here in the United States and in the Western media about what does this mean for West Asia? What does it mean for, as they say, the Middle East? What does this mean for all of these various fronts? I'm curious on what you think it means, because we do have a situation that Elijah has been talking and covering a lot about, what is a growing war of attrition, a long war that the resistance in Lebanon and elsewhere seems very prepared to fight. And Trump has both said that he's going to bring peace to the Middle East, but also has said that he's going to unleash and allow Israel to do even more of what it is doing. So I'm curious on your assessment of the overall situation to come, given that there will be political changes in the United States' empire?
I think, regardless of the political changes in the United States, the foreign policy and the policy towards Israel or towards the region would slightly really change. Only the way of dealing with things. Do I expect that Trump would not support Benjamin Netanyahu? No. But do I expect that he would have more to say or more to influence? Yes, of course. Now, how they would like to execute that, I think Trump was the one who did the normalization deals. And if they really plan on doing the same attitude or treating Syria, Lebanon, Iraq in the same manner, this shall not work or prevail. So I think we are yet to discover if the new Trump is different from the old Trump, and if Trump really has a say over Netanyahu for his own good, because I think the Israelis, whether they know it or not, they are on a self-destruction path. And the unlimited support, the blind support of Washington and the Pentagon to the Israelis did not really actually change things on the ground. They did not really eradicate Hamas, and they would never be able to eradicate Hezbollah, which is obvious. So I think I cannot really foresee now how Trump would play out this intended peace, but there is zero trust and there is zero friendliness from any American administration's foreign policy towards us, the natives, the people of this land. So I'm not really very optimistic.
Right. And Elijah, I wanted to bring it to you because on the military front, do you perceive any changes? Because on the one side, you have suspicions that the policy will get more hawkish, meaning more aggression to come in the region, which will have implications, of course, for all of the resistance fronts that you cover. But also, there has been this talk of quote unquote peace. So I'm curious as to your thoughts and assessment of the potentiality here of one side or the other playing out, or some version of both in a chaotic kind of policy regime.
The problem in all that is really what's happening in Israel. We are seeing a radical government and society that we have never seen before. And we are reading about the will of the society in Israel that wants the war to continue against Hamas and against Hezbollah. The only thing that the Israelis are saying, they want their captives back. But they're not saying stop the war on Gaza or stop killing Palestinian civilians or stop committing crimes or stop demonizing them. And on Lebanon, nobody is against the war. The majority in Israel are with the war. And by removing the defense minister, you have Gallant. It doesn't mean that Gallant was a soft politician or a defense minister. On the contrary, but now appointing Israel Katz as a foreign minister, he is less of a professional politician. That means Benjamin Netanyahu has everything under his control. And because of that, we know that Netanyahu wants to ethnic cleanse the Palestinians from north of Gaza. And he has started doing that in the first part of the north, starting isolating Jabalia camp, Jabalia city, Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, Shati from the rest of Gaza. And we're talking about the north. By doing so, it means he has plans. And will Donald Trump manage to convince him to change his plans? That is doubtful, because he feels more confident in destroying more of Gaza and eradicate the presence of the Palestinians by forcing them either to die by starvation or under the bombs or leave to an unsafe area, that he's going to displace them again from that part of the north to the south so he can grab more land of Gaza. In Lebanon, he hasn't started the war yet, but he is finding difficulties to break into Hezbollah's lines. And there again, he will not achieve his objectives because then he will leave Hezbollah stronger than ever. Although he has managed to inflict some damage on Hezbollah, but he has not defeated it. Otherwise, we would see all the tens of thousands of troops breaking in the south of Lebanon. Will Donald Trump stop Benjamin Netanyahu on the limits of the borders and Netanyahu accept with the damage that he has caused and the reconstruction that is going to weigh heavy on Hezbollah and Iran? And we satisfied with that? We don't know yet because we have the experience in the past with Donald Trump saying, I want to pull out from Syria. This is a land of death and sand, and then staying in Syria. And then he said he wants to pull out of Iraq, but he wants to be paid and then staying in Iraq. So between what the president of the United States promised during their campaign and what they can translate that on the ground with facts, there's a big difference. Nothing is going to change between now and the 20th of January. But then starting from the 20th of January, what are Donald Trump's priorities? Is it Ukraine and Russia? Or is it Ukraine, Russia, and the Middle East, and Iran, and the Iranian nuclear program, and Gaza, and Lebanon? It is not very clear. And then is the decision going to be accepted by Benjamin Netanyahu? And then Netanyahu needs to think about his domestic position. If he stops the war, is he going home? Is he strong enough to run a prime minister election and the Knesset election and then win it, or be accused of corruption and then face trial? All these questions are unanswered yet because in the next 2 months, we don't know what's going to happen and who's going to have the upper hand, or if this is going to be a status quo in Lebanon, but more ethnic cleansing in Gaza. We need to wait before Donald Trump takes office and what are his priorities.
Yes, indeed. And Ghadi, you said that Trump will not prevail if he takes on the policy that he took on during the first time he was president, especially in this new situation where there is an active, I mean, not only is there active genocide now on multiple fronts, but there is deep and active resistance that was not there, or at least was not as powerfully being undertaken prior. So could you maybe send a message, if possible, to American audiences, Western audiences, who may be viewing the risk of the situation in West Asia becoming even more, more imperiled by Trump presidency, given that he does have this very mixed record of, on the one hand, saying he would pull out of certain situations and conflicts, but on the other, working deeply with Israel to build up to the moment I believe we are in right now?
I don't think I have anything to say to American citizens about the American foreign policy. I don't think the American average Joe really is concerned. They are taxpayers for everything, but do they really have a say about it? I mean, I think even though we are living in times of war, as a journalist in Lebanon, I have more freedom than a journalist in America in these times, more or less. In the times when APAC and all this money is being stuffed into the media and the mainstream media, I don't think it's very logical to talk to American citizens about how they might change or influence Trump or Harris or Biden or any American administration's war, because I wouldn't like to think of them as complicit. I think it is time for the big change to happen in the United States, and this is a different conversation. But the message I would like to send is that maybe since they only speak about money, maybe you could stop paying the taxes for the weapons that are killing our children for a change. Other than that, I don't think I'm really entitled to speak about how they could really alter the policies. I mean, they go to the votes, they vote their representatives, and for me, it's apple or pear, different bipartisan representatives of the same foreign policy that ends up in actual hegemony in the Middle East and in West Asia. I think normalization will not happen in Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, not only because we have resistance. It's because wherever normalization did succeed, it didn't come in nations that had a problem, that had a pre-existing problem with the Zionist occupation. It's different. You cannot make believe. You cannot have a plastic surgery kind of normalization on these nations. I mean, Lebanon in the 80s, there was a plan and there was a president that actually wanted to go and sign a normalization, a peace treaty with the Israeli occupation. His name is Amin Jumail. He's still alive today. It didn't happen. It didn't work. They had their tanks in Beirut. They had half of the army with them, and it still didn't work. When I say it doesn't prevail, not because Trump is a weak president or because the United States of America is not capable in its weapons. It's just because you cannot change the actual reality on the ground. My message to the American citizens would be, or to the American viewers would be, how about you educate yourself a little more about the history of this struggle in this land, the actual occupation and the apartheid colonization of Palestine, and the rogue regime that continuously kills us for almost 8 decades now. And once you actually know the history and the root to that, you can actually talk about it more and more in your society. Because I don't think anybody who knows what the American policy is doing would approve. It's just that they don't really know or not as involved, or they don't know the actual story because they watch their accomplice mainstream media. So these are my 2 cents on that, Danny.
Yes, I mean, those are great points that need to be heeded. And Elijah, when it comes to, you mentioned that not much will likely change from here until January, and it'll depend on what Trump's priorities are given the situation on the ground that Ghadi alluded to. I'm curious as to your thoughts on, when it comes to all of these fronts right now, because we've been talking a lot about Hezbollah, but at the same time, Donald Trump is going to essentially be inheriting a situation where this genocide that the United States has been backing in Gaza has ignited resistance from Yemen to Iraq to Syria. We have Lebanon, of course, with Hezbollah and the other resistance forces there. And of course, Palestine, which we haven't spoken too much about. This is not going away. And I'm curious on your thoughts about, I don't believe that bombing more, which is a potential scenario that I think is very likely, more bombing, will stop this situation, it will defeat the resistance. What do you have to say about this?
At the beginning of this war, Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin warned Benjamin Netanyahu and the military in Israel, giving them the example of what the Americans did throughout the decade. He says that the Americans went to war in Afghanistan and in Iraq and in Syria and in Libya, but they never earned the heart and mind of the population. And he was warning the Israelis not to fall into the same trap, which is an acknowledgement of the devastating result of the US intervention in the Middle East, and warning the Israelis of what could come next. And the Israelis did exactly the opposite. They are the most hated people today on earth. I have to make a great distinction between the Jews and Judaism as a religion and the Israelis' crimes against humanity led by a war criminal that is Benjamin Netanyahu, according to the International Criminal Court. So in international laws, Israel is a pariah nation and it is led by war criminals. Therefore, they are against every single bit of the international laws. They have considered the Secretary General of the United Nations persona non grata. They have destroyed UNRWA offices, killed the UN personnel, and considered UNRWA as unlawful in Israel. So they violated everything we know about international laws. And the problem in all that is that the international community, the Western community, it did not move an inch, exposing their double standard and hypocrisy. The Middle Eastern countries did not move an inch against the killing of the population, of the civilians. The Israelis are not killing the military. They're not killing the non-combatant. They're not fighting against the resistance who has the right to fight back according to the United Nations. So they are demonizing the Palestinians, killing everybody. So what the world can do in front of this massacre that is committed on social media, the world is doing nothing. However, there is awareness among the population around the world what the Israelis are doing today, because they are exposing themselves on social media. They are showing the crime that are committing. And in fact, all these crimes have been used at the International Court of Justice to condemn Israel and the Israeli leadership. And they still don't care. So what God is saying, something needs to be done, that is true. And the people are the only one who can do something about it. Leaders have failed in every single nation, in the Middle East and in the West. They're not capable of standing against Israel because Israel is too powerful as a lobby. And they have managed to hijack the Judaism into their advantage, which many Jews disagree with what the Israeli Zionists are doing. Hence the difference between the two. So, is there more awareness today around the world? The answer is yes. People understand more about the Palestinian cause and have seen the Israelis' action because the Israelis showed us what they are doing. Is that going to lead us somewhere? Not in a short term, because in the short term we will have the war continuing and more atrocity are going to be committed. Are their leaders willing to stop that? Well, not yet, because they don't know what the Americans want to do, and they are the one who control most of the world that has some influence over Israel.
Yes, and before we move on, I would just want to say to this all of these points that we've been down this rodeo with Donald Trump. He was president from 2016 to 2020. His West Asia policy was a disaster. He attempted in many respects, and he did actually move, I think, along this path toward giving Israel what it is now doing, the green light for genocide, through the moving of the capital, through this attempt to normalize Israel through the Abraham Accords, Israel with the other Gulf countries. In my estimation, if Donald Trump were smart now in becoming president of the United States in January, he would see that situation has actually led to what you were referring to, Elijah, which is this. Not only is Israel the most hated society, but it is also going through incredible just difficulties and challenges that it will not overcome, in my opinion. And Radi, I might have you have the last word on this before moving on, where now Israel is not only stuck in a long war of resistance. I don't believe Israel can actually win against all of these fronts, but also it's having internal problems that are very much connected to this, not just the firing of Gallant and his replacement, but everything that surrounds that, from economically to the utter, loss of faith, and maybe not for the reasons that we would like it, Radi, but loss of faith in the Netanyahu regime. But your last word on this.
I think it's more than the Netanyahu regime at that point. You're talking about a settler society. This is not a society. These are like people brought from all around the world to serve as actual human shields to the Zionist occupation program. So these people are already in trouble with their existence. And billions of dollars have been spent to radicalize, militarize these settlers of different shapes and forms, and to carry on day in, day out, all sorts of apartheid restrictions and policies towards the indigenous people, the people of Palestine. You've been spending billions of dollars to try to prove that this land is occupiable. And then now you have like around million Israelis. They are internally displaced. The other millions are frightened always, and they are like uh, going to shelters on a daily or a weekly manner. I'm talking about Tel Aviv and Haifa and different parts of uh, quote unquote Israel, occupied territories of Palestine. So in general, the whole point of the Zionism project in the Palestinian lands is not happening. It's all it's all botched. You've been planting this idea of settler society in this land for decades, and now they're all displaced or they're all fleeing. There's more than 20% that have already left because they all have dual passports. And in general, the economy is crumbling and the sense of security is not okay. How can you even convince more and more people from around the world to come and serve as settlers and human shields when all this that Elijah has been speaking about, this pariah, is more notorious now for the actual crimes against humanity? I think the whole point of Israel, of having this land taken from the Palestinians, the whole point is not even justifiable at that point, and it's a matter of time before the dismantlement of this regime happens. So it's not about Netanyahu. I think at that point, Netanyahu is going to have to choose. It's either he steps aside, or he even facilitates and even makes it catalyzes the whole uh, Israel dismantlement. This is how I see it.
Yes, Sarari, great points. Now I would like to close, if we could spend 15, 20 minutes on this last topic of Iran, because I think it all ties into everything we've been talking about. And I would like to begin with you, Elijah. You had commented on a prominent intellectual in, if we can call him that, in the United Arab Emirates, Abdul Khalik Abdullah, who had this to say about Trump's victory. And you replied to him in kind, but I'll let you speak on this. And I think this is the big one, right? He said, bad news for Tehran and its proxies. Netanyahu is a big winner. Now time to go after Iran's nuclear facilities. I wanted to bring that up in the context of, we know that there is the potential for the strike back from Iran to come. Iran has said it will respond to Israel's late October strike on its territory, which killed, I believe, about 4 Iranian military personnel. Elijah, will Iran strike back? And if it does, do you see what Mr. Abdullah is saying as being a possibility, that now that Trump is going to become president, we will see this go even further than what has already transpired?
Well, we have seen that Iran was capable of striking Israel twice in retaliation to the Israeli violation of Iran's sovereignty by first attacking and destroying its consulate that protected by the United Nations status in Damascus, and a second time by assassinating a Hamas leader as a guest in the capital, Tehran. And Iran has retaliated in both situations. Now, Israel hit Iran recently, and Iran will definitely retaliate. It's just a question of time. Now, if Trump going to deal with that, is not going to deal with it before the 20th of January. And we still have at least 2.5 months almost for Iran to retaliate. And I think Iran will retaliate even before that. And the American administration, the current one, is aware that Iran is going to retaliate because they brought the THAAD interception missile system. They brought one battery of 48 missiles, and they are thinking of bringing a second one, because the last time Iran flooded the Israeli interception missiles and managed to cause damage to the Israelis, and the Israeli interception missile system failed to intercept all the Iranian missiles. Now, where this is going to lead us is going to lead to another hit from Israel, because we have seen the Americans bringing another squadron of F-15I, which is a plane that is made for strategic bombardment, which means they can cover a long-range area, and we're talking about between Israel and Iran. Of course, they need to be refilled in the air, but this is the kind of jets that the Israeli would use, and the Americans will support them. Where this is going to lead us is going to lead again to another Iranian retaliation. Why this is happening? It's not happening because Iran wants a war. Iran wants, borrowing the terminology of Benjamin Netanyahu, to escalate to de-escalate. So Iran is saying, I am not going to allow you to destroy Gaza and to destroy Lebanon and just sit and watch. Of course, every bullet fired by Hezbollah against Israel comes from Iran. Nevertheless, Iran is not going to allow the Israelis to defeat Hezbollah or to destroy Lebanon and just sit and watch and do nothing about it. So the use of the missile that we've spoke about from the very beginning, a Fateh 110, it is a new missile, but relatively old to the new versions that are 110M, and there are other much more modern missiles that Iran supplied Hezbollah with and is allowing Hezbollah to use it. So it is part of the war. Therefore, Iran will participate even further and continue this exchange of bombardment between Iran and Israel to make sure that Israel feels under pressure and not getting away with what Hezbollah is doing from the border, when Hezbollah is not willing to attack the civilians as Israel is doing. Now that will change the game in the Middle East, because Middle Eastern countries, particularly in the Gulf, are extremely concerned to see Iran winning in this war. Because if Israel doesn't win, it means Iran and its allies are winning, or at least they have not been defeated. And already that puts a lot of pressure on the Middle Eastern countries to see Iran having allies in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, in Lebanon, and in Palestine. And now for Iran to dare to bomb Israel, and it happened twice, and it's going to happen a third time, and then continue challenging Israel, knowing that it is supported by the strongest and superpower country like the United States, is going to increase Iran's position in the Middle East. Already in Yemen, Ansarullah, the Houthis, have challenged the Americans and the British, the two strongest navy in the world, that failed to deter the Ansarullah, to stop them from closing the passage of the Red Sea on the Israeli merchandise unless they lift the siege on the Palestinian in Gaza, who are starving and they are denied food, water, electricity, and medical supply. So already Iran is having the upper hand. And this is where Donald Trump will be useful in the eyes of Middle Eastern countries, to interfere. Some that have wishful thinking of hitting Iran, but it's not going to happen because the dozen of military bases, the US military bases around Iran in the Middle East, they are sitting ducks and they represent a legitimate target for Iran in case Israel and America start a war on Iran.
Ghadi, I wanted to bring you in to talk about how people where you are perceiving this situation, the fact that Iran will strike back against Israel, and that there is now what seems to be a potential back and forth that could lead to all-out war, which is the big concern, of course, for those who are concerned by such things in the United States and should be concerned by such things. What has been the perception of this? Because we've spoken in the past of how Iran is perceived by the West, by the United States, to be essentially, and I pulled up Mr. Abdullah's post about Tehran and its proxies, that Iran is kind of owns the resistance as a whole. But how has, given that there is going to be further and further confrontation between Iran and Israel, how have people been perceiving it where you are in Lebanon?
Well, Lebanon, Syria, Iraq, some of the Bahrainis, some of the Kuwaitis, many of the people in the region perceive Iran as an ally. The resistance groups perceive Iran as an ally. It would be called proxy if it is somewhere else. It is our land that is being invaded, or there is trials to invade. It is our homes, our people that are being slaughtered. It's not about Iran to us. Iran is an ally. I think the people are always very excited when Iran steps in. Some of the people in Lebanon and in Syria and in Iraq and in Palestine want Iran to be even more involved, knowing that Iran is a strong, capable arm industrial kind of a nation, and that it is always holding the banner of fighting the Zionist occupation of Palestine. I think people in general are they trust the alliance that is called the Axis of the Resistance, trusts the Iranian management of its alliance and how it actually articulates it and manifests it. In Syria, in the beginning of the Syrian uprising, Iran had nothing to do with it. 2 years later, when there was the terror groups, then when the ISIS started, Iran was there and Iran did what it needed to do in order to stand next to its ally at the time, the Syrian governance and the Syrian president Bashar al-Assad. So today, there is more or less trust in the process when the Iranians are involved, given that Iran is not like the other parts of the resistance axis, as in it is a country that has a presence and a Ministry of Foreign Affairs and a Ministry of Defense, and it has a different hierarchy in taking and calling the shots when it comes to actual full-blown and all-out war. The thing is, there's always trials in the region, and actually by the Gulf, by the American alliance, there's always these trials to get inside or to get in between, to divide and conquer between the people of Lebanon and Syria and the actual ally Iran. As they say, see, Iran has left you, it didn't even start an all-out war. So what the West doesn't even see is that people here in the region, they want even more from Iran. They want Iran to use all its weapons and rain down on the Zionist occupation of Palestine. So it's always about the perspective when talking about Iran. And the alliance is not new. And in its history, the Islamic Republic of Iran has never stepped back from any alliance. It always kept its promises and its bridges with the peoples or groups or actual nations. This is why there is actual trust.
Yes, indeed. And perhaps Elijah, as we begin to close here, I heard you on a program talk about, and I think this could be extended to the entirety of the resistance, on a program with Norman Finkelstein, talk about how the Palestinian resistance has never put up a white flag throughout the entirety of this genocidal onslaught that they are facing. I wanted to ask you if you could sum up the state of the axis of resistance as we move forward here. With that in mind, because I think it is a fitting metaphor for this entire situation that West Asia finds itself in, where you do have resistance that is not at all ready or willing to put up a white flag, no matter how brutal the opposing side, the Israeli and U.S. side, become and get.
The problem today, the Israelis and their allies are facing is the defeat or the impossibility to reach the stated objective from the beginning of the war. With the war in Ukraine and the way this war is going, it shows that the US hegemony is starting to lose momentum. And with the Israeli doing against the resistance in Palestine and in Lebanon, supported by the United States, the UK, Germany, and all the rest of NATO members, not managing to occupy 364 square kilometers in Gaza, where people used to live for decades in the open air concentration camp, and then moving toward Lebanon, setting the objective to occupy 500 square kilometers between the Lebanese borders and the south of the Litani River, it shows that the almighty armies cannot win a war and can be challenged. Now, undoubtedly, the Israelis have the most formidable army in the Middle East and the 14th strongest in the world, supported by the superpower that is the United States of America, and all the warehouses open, the intelligence support. Israel is part of CENTCOM, the Central US Command in the Middle East, enjoying the support there. More than 6,000 flights were offered to the Israelis and were engaged in the battle in the last 12 and a half months, of which only 20% conducted by Israel and all the rest by the Israeli allies that are supporting the Israelis, guarding the Mediterranean, guarding the Red Sea, trying to intercept all the missiles and the drone, and yet failing to give Israel the upper hand. It's because Israel is fighting the people, and people cannot be defeated. They can be squashed, they can be cornered, they can be tortured, they can be killed, but they cannot be exterminated. The Israelis tried in the last 78 years to do so, and they have failed. And now they are trying for the last 12 months to do the same in Gaza and in the West Bank, and they're not succeeding. And they thought they have defeated Hezbollah by killing the Secretary General, destroying what they thought all its warehouses, killing the first line of command, and then starting the ground invasion. And yet they did not manage to cross, which they can cross, but can they stay again facing these challenges? Because the soul of those who own the land fight in a different way from the occupiers who are coming to take and grab the land or to destroy it and leave. But the Israeli manage to win something, the hatred of the people they are dealing with in Palestine and in Lebanon, who will never forget the level of criminality, because we've never seen the Israeli reaching that level of criminality in all its existence since 1948, despite the massacres they have committed in Palestine, building garages over the cemeteries and pushing people to refugee camps, because this is what Gaza is about, spreading the Palestinian all over the world in different camps in Lebanon and Jordan and Syria and in other parts of the world. And yet they failed to submit the Palestinians, and they failed to submit the Lebanese. This is why the resistance will not raise the white flag, because raising a white flag against this level of atrocity and criminality, it means being killed the next day in different ways. So these people who are resisting today prefer to be killed in the battlefield or live and fight the Israelis. Because when the Israelis are treating the prisoners in a way that they are starving them, they allowing them to die in jail, they even sodomize them. And on top of that, the person who is responsible for committing this atrocity against the prisoners is received by all the Israeli medias with his face uncovered and received like a hero. How do you want the Palestinians and the Lebanese to shake hands with this kind of people? They will never do that. And who told them not to do that? The Israeli themselves, by showing the level of criminality they can reach.
Yes, yes. Unfortunately, Ghadi Francis had to depart. But everything that you said, Elijah, is just so spot on and just makes me think of just so many resistance wars in the past, so many attempts from aggressor countries like my own, the United States, for example, in Vietnam and elsewhere, where that resistance, that aggression led to just stronger and stronger and stronger resistance until the United States, especially in Vietnam, could no longer engage in what it was doing, these atrocities, these war crimes, this attempt to subdue essentially the entire population. But Elijah, before we go, I wanted to ask you just one brief question. We haven't talked so much about the Palestine situation, especially when it comes to northern Gaza. My one brief question is: given that we have what seems to be this axis of resistance, which has many, many, many fronts, how does, for example, what Iran has been doing in terms of trying to establish deterrence with the Israeli regime and in terms of aiding the resistance, how does this connect to the overall resistance in Gaza? Because you've been covering this very, very, very closely, and I feel like it just hasn't been getting the attention it deserves. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts about that and connections.
The Iranian constitution, Article 153, 154, imposes on Iran, because this is what Iran imposes on itself, to support all the oppressed people around the world. The Palestinians, in particular, were given a special treat. In 1979, in February, the embassy that belongs to Israel was given to Yasser Arafat and was the first Palestinian embassy in the world in Tehran. Now, although the Iranians disagree with the Palestinians to have a deal with the Israelis, because the Iranians consider the Israelis are untrustworthy, and the Oslo Agreement 1993, 1995, Oslo II, and the promise that the Palestinians will have their state in 1999 proved that the Iranians were right, and the Palestinians hoped to establish peace with Israel, but they were cheated by the Americans, who are not a good partner for peace, and by the Israelis, who have no intention to give them a state. The Palestinians still believe in two-state solutions. And those who think that Hamas said they want to exterminate and destroy Israel is not true, because in 2018, there is a communique by Hamas saying, we accept the two-state solutions. And accepting the two-state solution means recognizing Israel as a state. Now, that goes against the ideology of Iran, but Iran doesn't have a say, because it's up to the Palestinians to decide what they want to do. And Iran did the same with Lebanon. 1982, when the Israeli invaded Lebanon, Hezbollah was created in 1985 as a power to fight the Israeli occupation. Iran did not exist in 1982 in Lebanon. It came to help the Lebanese to the Lebanese demand, who asked the support of Iran. So again, the Iranians support the Lebanese in their objective to push the Israeli out, and they managed after 18 years. But the Israelis still occupy part of the country and part of the south of Lebanon, and the Lebanese want the Israeli out, and the Palestinians are asking for a two-state solution. The proof we have that Israel is now willing for peace is because what's happening in the West Bank, where there is a Palestinian state, supposedly, recognized by the West, recognized by the Americans, and should have been recognized by the Israelis, who no longer recognize the two-solution state per the vote of the Knesset 97 vote that said no two-state solutions, and recently 57 canceled completely the idea of a Palestinian state. Therefore, the Palestinians don't have a choice. Hamas is not in the West Bank. It is a lie that the Israelis are fighting Hamas. The Israelis are fighting the Palestinian people. They are killing 43,000 in Gaza, and they're not Hamas. There is a small part of Hamas. They wounded more than 150,000, and so many thousand are under the rubble. These are not Hamas, they are population. Israel bombed the 10 UNRWA schools, they're not Hamas. Again, ethnic cleansing the north, it's again pushing the population that remained in the north and has no place to go. More than 100,000 were asked to leave. That is ethnic cleansing because the Palestinians are not allowed to stay in Palestine. And that is what the Likud party in 1977 manifest on the Jewish library state clearly that the presence of the Palestinian is a threat to the national security of Israel and that the West Bank belongs to Israel. So in the light of all that, Iran is in the Middle East to help those who want to stand for their right. The solution to get rid of Iran is very simple. For Israel to stop its aggression and killing of the civilian, to give the Palestinian their right, to give the Lebanese the land that it is occupying, respect the integrity and sovereignty of Lebanon and Syria, and stop its warmongering and stop being given the free hand to do whatever it wants and being unaccountable. That is the problem. We have today in the West a moral quandary between our loyalty to the US or the value that we have lost. We don't have values anymore. We don't respect international laws. We don't believe in one standard to everyone, but we have double standard. And the level of hypocrisy has reached an unprecedented level that we can no longer pretend to stand on high moral ground. We've lost everything only to protect Israel, a nation that is accused of being led by war criminals, and everything they're doing is massacring the civilians. This is how our role is in killing the civilians, in contributing. We are partner with Israel with everything the Israelis are doing.
Yes, indeed, Elijah. I think that's a very fitting way to close this program today. Thank you so much for joining. Before we go, make sure you go to the video description where you can find both Ghadi Francis's X account, where she posts all of her journalistic work, including her work at the West Asia Post. You can also find Elijah Magnier's website in the video description as well, so you can follow his work and subscribe too, because we do need to support independent journalism. In the video description, too, you can find all the places to support this work, from Patreon to Substack and so much more. Without further ado, everyone, we're going to close up here. Please do hit the like button as you go. Thanks to everyone who moderated. Thanks to everyone who viewed. Thank you to the Rumble community. With that said, bye-bye, and I will see you all again very soon.